Where are you, Mark? I can't really see.
I'm at Allie's because right now I can't be in Cornwall because I'm about to go to Berlin. And so I'm at Allie's house because Allie's got the super fast internet. His internet speed is mad. Like where, mine is usually, I think I'm doing really well if I get 60 or 70. Allie's internet speed is 504.
504 what?
Mega bits, bytes, mega things.
Mega things.
Yeah, 500. Yeah, like when we were that
out
time
of
that
what?
we
504
out of what? Yeah.
What would be the top? What would be the most you can experience all at once?
Well, if you remember, there was once when I was in the offices of Wayland Yutani, and I hardwired the computer into is it called an Ethernet, an cable, right? And the computer, which my computer, which goes, if you put it on fast.com, it goes 820. Oh, I've got 100, right? It went 820, 100, 200, 500, 600, 800, and then it went 1. And it was like, what happened? And Josh said, yeah, no, that's 1 terabyte.
Who's Josh?
The engineer.
I know you need to explain that because obviously
Josh has been referred to before. Josh, who I met. Well, I mean, I've known Josh for a long time, but Josh is also in Cornwall, and we met at the most pagan ceremony in the streets of Penzance when people were waving fiery demons in the air, and there was a person in front of me with ginger hair, and I thought, it can't possibly be Josh, and lo and behold, it was.
Right, okay. Just if you refer to random people, I just need to...
No, I think all the listeners are tuned in with Josh.
I think it appears to be 504 gigabits. Gigabits,
not terabytes. Okay, gigabytes.
But what would be the maximum amount of gigabit?
I think it's
gigabitage.
I don't know. I think isn't it infinite, or is it like the speed of light that there is an ultimate? And there must be. I don't know because basically, when I was in the New Forest, I was getting between 8 and 11, right. And then in Cornwall, I get between 50 and 70. But at Allie's house, I get 504
gigabitage.
No, 504 megabytes. Josh says the fastest internet speed ever recorded was 319 terabits per second. So that's an answer to your question. Thank you, Josh. See, the answer came from Cornwall.
What's a terabit what's it look like, a terabit?
Josh, you have to answer this. What's a terabit look like?
If it was on the desk in front of you in a Petri dish, what would it look like, a terabit? I'm just interested.
I don't think you're fully grasping the nature of electricity.
Is that right? It just sounds like it's a Jurassic Park future movie.
Clever girl.
Pardon?
Jurassic Park. It's the bit when the little velociraptor figures out how to undo the thing and he goes, clever girl.
Oh, right.
And then gets demised.
Apparently there's at least 1 trillion of them. But what?
Wow.
If there are 1 trillion terabits, why is the fastest ever recorded 319?
Because that's as fast as they have got. But in theory,
possible to have 1 trillion.
Apparently so. I mean, we're asking Josh, so...
Do you think this sounds like a coherent and informed conversation?
No, I'm sure it'll hit the cutting room floor. I'm sure nobody will actually hear this bit of the program.
Which is a shame, because we need to welcome all our new subscribers who may have found the show and then they've already tuned away due to the fun and games with the Melanie film last week.
Yeah.
If you are a new subscriber, you're very welcome. Thanks very much. And if you can explain how there's 1 trillion of them, but you can only have 319 at once, that would also be quite helpful.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you enjoyed the Melania stuff, hang around because there's lots more where that came from, though probably not exactly in that vein.
No,
I would have thought.
No, this week we're going to be talking about some films as opposed to some bribes. So films, in Take One, we have Crime 101, which is a heist thriller. We have Whistle, which is a horror movie. We have Little Amelie, which is an animation. And we have Wuthering Heights with our very special guest.
It's director Emerald Fennell. She's going to be with us shortly. Reviews in Take Two, Mark.
Stitchhead, again, an animation. And Looney Tunes, The Day the Earth Blew Up, which is my favourite title of a film this year.
What happens in that film?
Take a wild guess.
Oh, okay. Plus all the other stuff, including 5-Question Film Club. Each week, we pick a film that's on Freeview or streaming, and Mark tackles our 5 essential questions about it before you watch. Build up a weekly film-watching habit around the show. Sign up at patreon.com, where all the fun and groovy people hang out. Plus, we'll have further discussion on the best Bronte adaptations on TV or film. for One Frame Back, plus questions in which we answer this question. Well, we try. What is the film that offers so much for most of the running time and then completely falls flat on its face at the end? Details coming up later. Stephen Blair has been in touch, age 49.
Hello.
Dear Video and Nasty, I am the Stephen who in a recent Wednesday lunchtime live treat horrified both of you good selves. As I stated, my parents allowed me to watch Cannibal Holocaust before I was 13. Yeah. I don't recall how old I actually was, but it was certainly before that age, which is unwise. My recollection is my parents, along with other friends' parents at the time, took BBFC ratings very lightly. VHS, along with the advent of Clyde Cablevision, a very early cable service in the city of Glasgow, meant that films such as CH, as no one ever called it, and Basket Case were seen by friends of me at a young age. I saw Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, before I actually saw the first Halloween. My parents, of course, also showed me normal films. My first cinema trip was to see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, although let's be honest, that queen is very scary. The 80s were indeed a different time. I was lucky to get a small black and white portable TV for my bedroom with the hope of seeing more scary movies. I found the BBC's Moviedrome with Alex Cox and subsequently Mark Cousins. This, along with a fantastic local video shop owner in the 90s, who would steer me towards 60s and 70s classics. I would therefore say it has turned out okay in the end. Down with, and up with parents who give the love of cinema to the children, even if they didn't know it. Except that could easily have gone so wrong, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this is, so how old do we think Stephen is?
He's 49 because he says so.
He's 49. So he would have been 11 in what year? Do the maths on that.
You do it.
No, I can't because I'm actually very, very numerically illiterate. As you know, I've got some kind of numerical dysphasia or whatever. It's like numbers jump around on a page for me.
Me too.
49 is 50. Okay, so it's 20. Let's say it's 2025. Take 25 years, 50 years. So he would have seen it in 90. No, that can't be right. 1975. No. So he was born in 1975. So he will have seen it in 1986. It didn't have a BBFC certificate then. So it's not that your parents took the 18 certificate lightly. It didn't have a certificate then.
I think the clue is the title, isn't it? I mean, what else do you need to know?
No, I know. No, but it's interesting because it's like it was passed by the BBFC with severe cuts around about 2001 after the BBFC changeover. But the version that your parents allowed you to see, I presume, was an old Vipco version, which was pretty much the unedited, uncut, unrated version. And I wouldn't advise most people to watch that when they were grown-ups.
All right. Well, it seems though Stephen Blair's turned out okay.
Turned out fine, yeah, exactly. He's done we've
only got his word for it.
Yeah. And as we've always pointed out, Julia Ducournau, who made Titan, which you absolutely love, say the thing you usually say.
She's having sex with a car.
Watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre when she was under 10 because her parents left her in a room with cable television and the remote control.
Well, there you go. Case proven, my lad.
Case proven, yeah.
Correspondence at kermodemayo.com. If you know Stephen Blair and, concluded that he's a wrong-un,
yes.
Get in touch, obviously, because he's claiming he's perfectly fine, but, we've only got his word for it. What's out there? What's new?
Okay, Crime 101. This is a heist movie. It's adapted from a 2020 novella by Don Winslow, and it's written and directed by Bart Layton. Bart Layton's name you'll know. He has a background in documentaries, but he made a splash with that film American Animals. Now, I did a BBC Secrets of Cinema on heist movies, and I'm a big fan of heist movies. And Bart Layton is a big fan of a lot of things that I like the films of William Friedkin, who incidentally was a big fan of American Animals. So the story basically plays out along the 101 freeway. Chris Hemsworth is Mike Davis, who is this Mustang-owning thief who has conducted a number of super efficient jewel heists. He seems to work with insider information because he knows exactly where to hit, when to hit, and he leaves no trace. Here's a clip from the trailer.
He hits jewels, cash, and high-value items. He knows exactly what to transport and when. There's no DNA. He's in and out in seconds.
Your guy's untraceable.
I need that.
And I came here to make you a business proposition. Worked at the same company for 11 years. You're a VP when you should be a partner. Those high-value items your company insures, I make them disappear. Start by handing me your phone.
So you're a thief.
Guys you work for, you think they're squeaky clean?
I need to start considering myself and maybe my clients.
Don't threaten me.
Life's too short to drive boring cars, right?
So, what you heard in that, Mark Ruffalo is a detective who makes it his business to track down Mike Davis. Halle Berry is the insurance broker who, after being snubbed at work, is approached by him with an offer to be in on a job that will make them both rich. The fly in the ointment,
good cast.
It's a terrific cast. Fly in the ointment is Orman, who is this mercurial biker live wire who's also on Mike's trail and who is played in typically firecracker fashion by Barry Keoghan, who is also in American Animals, and whose appearance in the drama is like someone throws a hand grenade into the plot to see what happens. Starry cast also includes Nick Nolte, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Monica Barbaro, Corey Hawkins, Tate Donovan. I mean, quite the roster. And apparently Pedro Pascal was almost inevitably at one point considered for one of the major roles, because I think there's now a rule, which is that if you're making any film, you have to find out first whether it's possible to get Pedro Pascal in it. So look, I really enjoyed this. There is a scene in it in which Chris Hemsworth is in a car with Mark Ruffalo, who's hiding his real identity from him, okay? And they have this discussion in which Chris Hemsworth says that when he was a kid, he dreamt of owning a Mustang, like Steve McQueen. And Mark Ruffalo says, well, that's interesting because most people your age wouldn't know Steve McQueen. What's your favorite Steve McQueen film? And he says, Bullet. And Mark Ruffalo says, oh, really? Because mine is The Thomas Crown Affair. And what I loved about that scene is a number of things. Firstly, because it's nodding to all the references of the film. I mean, obviously Bullet, and Bullet then connects us to French Connection in terms of car chases. But also, it's about, they're having a conversation about one thing, but they're actually having it about another thing. It's partly it's about, I know who you are and I know what you're doing. Partly it's about you all watching this know what genre we're in. And partly it's about the kind of, the generational gap between the two characters. But it's also about this thing about ownership, about dreaming, about owning a Mustang. And it's very playful and it's very sort of, it knows what it's doing and it knows that the audience is smart enough to keep up. And incidentally, whilst this is all happening, they're driving through LA and there's like homelessness and poverty on the streets just beyond the car window. And I did an interview with Bart Layton on stage at the BFI South Bank, and I asked him about the scene, and he said, "Look, the thing is, if you're making a heist movie, what you want is a ripping yarn that gives you a kind of skeleton upon which to hang other things, the things that the film is really about." And he said, so for him, what the film is really about is partly it's about his love-hate relationship with LA, because he obviously spent time in LA, but he's not an American native, and partly it's about that kind of thing about defining who you are by what you own, but also defining who you are by the anxiety about what other people think of you, which is kind of to do with what's happening with the Halle Berry character. So it is on one level this kind of sly critique of materialism and the goals that you give yourself. I've got a number in my head that I have to attain this amount. I have to get this amount of finance. I have to get this amount of stuff. I have to get these things that will make me the person I am. But it's all built around this kind of really ripping crime thriller. And whilst I was watching it, I was thinking at one point, this is reminding me slightly of Michael Mann and Heat, the same sort of sense of location and the story being intertwined. And I know you loved Heat, and I think you'd really like Crime 101. It's also got a brilliant score by Blank Mass, a.k.a. Benjamin John Power, who's this electro pioneer who did the score for things like Calm with Horses, which I absolutely love, with Barry Keoghan. And here, it's what they're doing is they're blending stuff by the London Contemporary Orchestra with synthesizers to make, synthesized sound to make this kind of really sort of pulsating, throbbing score that gives you a sense of action, but also gives you a sense of depth and something else going on underneath it, this kind of, sort of sadness and melancholy. I really enjoyed it. And it's one of the, every now and then you see a film in the cinema, you think this is just a great film. It's just a really good cinematic experience because it's a heist movie. It knows how to do the heist movie stuff. It's got, exactly as you said, a terrific cast. But underneath that propulsive surface, there is something else going on. I just enjoyed myself enormously.
When I saw the posters for the first time, I did kind of hope that Mark Ruffalo would be around because he hasn't been on the show for a number of years. And he's one of those people, I don't know, like Saoirse Ronan, you go, oh, okay, they're in it. I'm going to watch it because he always is quality.
He is. But the whole cast is like that. And, Barry Keoghan is real. He's real kind of, like the blue touch paper stuff, isn't it? Whenever he's in something, there's going to be stuff happening. But as I said, I'm a fan of Bart Layton because I've enjoyed his previous work, and I like the fact that he's got he likes genre in the same way that I do, and I do like a great heist movie. I love that thing about you've got a great plan and then something starts to make it unravel. And in this case, the thing that starts to make it unravel is Barry Keoghan's character.
An email from Richard in Sheffield.
Yeah.
Dear teaser and trailer, I write following the recent question from Donna regarding trailers and whether it met the code to talk at normal volume whilst they're on in the cinema.
Yes.
My family and I have developed a 100% code compliant system for reacting to and assessing the trailers during any cinema trip. After each trailer has shown, we place our hands down in front of us, displaying a number of fingers to individually score each one out of 10.
That's very good.
The system is simply that based on the trailer out of 10, how much would we like to see the film? Later on, these scores are averaged out, and alongside Mark's reviews, of course, that helps us to determine options for future cinema trips.
Fantastic.
This is a system which works well, causes no disruption to other cinema goers, and adds an extra element of interest to the trailers, which could otherwise largely pass you by in quite a bland fashion. I thoroughly recommend it to you all. If you're going with other people, that makes perfect sense. I suppose it's not very helpful if you're on your own, but anyway, there you go. So Richard in Sheffield, thank you. Is that the kind of thing you might do at a screening if you've got a couple of critics? I know you wouldn't get trailers, would you? So
No, we don't get trailers because critics get cross about trailers. Actually, I say we don't get trailers. When you have the sort of big multimedia screenings, you do, and you can hear the groan. There used to be a great, the doyen of film critics, London film critics certainly, was Alexander Walker, who wrote for the London Evening Standard, who, if they started playing a trailer, would get up, walk out of the room and remonstrate with the PR, explaining to them that it was not his job to watch trailers.
Okay. That sounds like a bit of a knobbish thing to do, really, because by the time it's not the person outside's fault, is it, that they're showing a trailer?
No, he would do it very politely, though. Mm-hmm. He was a strange. I've disagreed with almost everything he said in print, but I have to say, he was an absolute icon of film criticism.
Correspondence at KermodeMayo.com. What are you doing next, Mark? Well, I'll tell you. Mark is doing Whistle, Little Amelie, and Wuthering Heights, directed by our special guest, Emerald Fennell. Plus, we'll have the UK and US box office top 10, featuring recaps of everything that's out in the UK cinema, and of course, the Laughter Lift. Both are delighted at the prospect. How delighted are you, Mark, at the prospect?
What I'm delighted at is the prospect of just saying to the production team, okay, since Simon has now taken over these functions, don't bother putting them in my name in the script, because as Simon knows, I'm off script at this point.
Yes, that's very true. Okay, box office time. And I'm just checking, Mark.
Yes.
It looks as though the Melanie film is nowhere.
Really?
And
it's a shock.
It's dropped 67% to number 10 in America.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
So it didn't have legs.
Thomas
Melanie doesn't have legs.
Thomas Bickerdike says, I love the part where Sigourney Weaver picked her up in a forklift and threw her out of the airlock.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was really good.
SKSM9, bunch of letters, says the film will sweep up the FIFA Oscars. OB, CS2, shame that the title Despicable Me was already taken.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
And a listener has also uncovered an interesting, what looks like a booking anomaly.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, there's more in questions, schmestions, actually. But anyway, so that's the Melanie film, which is just sort of nowhere, but I just thought I'd mention it. And hello to everyone around the world who might be listening to this because they were sent your review, which has been viewed by how many people? About 500,000 people or something?
It's just shy of 500,000 at the moment, yeah.
All right. So if you missed it, check it out because it is a tour de force, obviously. As far as the numbers are concerned, number 11 is The Strangers Chapter 3.
Okay, so this wasn't press screen. This is the fifth Strangers film and the last of the Rennie Harlin trilogy. Not press screen because the previous one was rubbish. And if you remember, when I was talking about that, I couldn't believe that Rennie Harlin had got himself into this. But the official thing is, following the release of Strangers Chapter 1 and Strangers Chapter 2, Strangers Chapter 1, Strangers Chapter 2 and 3 underwent a month of additional photography to rework the film with audience feedback from the first film. 3 weeks of the reshoots were devoted to Chapter 3. So unsurprisingly, they haven't shown it to us.
Okay. Actually, I should have said before we get to number 11 that Hamlet, the Riz Ahmed film,
yes,
is not in the 10, but
but it was a fairly limited theatrical release, wasn't it? I think that's the case.
Yeah, that's Hamlet.
Hamlet.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar.
Found under benches and hedges.
Dear Yorick and alas, says Robin Moss, I saw Riz Ahmed's Hamlet yesterday in a very much not packed screening, 5 other people in North Finchley.
That's a shame.
3 of them left after 10 minutes as well, which I assume means that they had mistaken the film for Hamnet.
Hamnet.
A film with obviously a very different tone, style and emotional range. Overall, I felt this was a really good adaptation of Hamlet with superb acting, strong camera work and some incredible sequences. The To Be or Not to Be Seen, which we talked about with Riz.
Yeah, it's great.
Particularly memorable, as well as the Asian wedding take on a play within a play. I would also make 2 points. Firstly, for Shakespeare's longest and wordiest play, the film is surprisingly light on its dialogue. Most of the emotional heavy lifting is done by the acting, which is uniformly excellent.
It is.
And the film could almost be seen with the sound off and it would still hang together. Secondly, this really is Riz Ahmed's Hamlet. He is on camera, indeed right in the middle of the shot for basically the entire film.
He is.
And thankfully, he is a magnetic screen presence.
I thought it was a really smart movie, and I thought he did brilliantly with it.
Yeah. And I think, as I mentioned in the interview to him, that it'll be a movie, who knows if it's going to make the top 10 at any stage, but will be shown and watched and admired and studied for a long time.
I agree.
It will have a long tail. Number 10, number 17 over there, 28 years later, Bone Temple.
I did an onstage thing at the BFI. I think it's because with Jack O'Connell, and he said to say hello.
Were you slightly scared by him?
No, because it was, I'd already heard the interview that you did with him, and in which he was very nice and forthcoming and not scary. So that I kind of take. I know he's played a bunch of very, very scary characters, but I'd already heard him being nice to you, so that was all fine.
Number 9 here, number 4 over there is Iron Lung.
So this came up last week, and this is the kind of, homemade surprise hit. And my friend Van Connor sent me a whole bunch of information about it and said, do try and check it out because it's, it's interesting at least. So I'm going to go and see it tomorrow afternoon.
Craig Mather says, it was a struggle. Even with a latte, I zoned out a quarter in. Sam is an almost silent protagonist, which theoretically lets viewers project themselves into the role, but the lack of characterization leaves the stakes unclear.
Right.
The flashbacks hint at a wider universe, but we only get fragments. It keeps us in darkness, stylistically deliberate, but often at the expense of being engaging. Okay. Now the praise. The Lovecraftian atmosphere, the Cronenberg-esque sinew and gore, the tactile, sweaty, grungy future dripping with blood. The stunt work impresses, and for such a tiny team and budget, it's a genuine cinematic statement. Now, I don't know if you pronounce his name Markiplier. That's how it's written. His real name is Mark Fishback, but Markiplier, possibly. Anyway, proves he can make a film. I left feeling this could end up culturally significant. I hope it sparks a wave of indie cinema. Time and money well spent. And then Craig says 5 out of 10. So that sounds like a low score, bearing in mind what you said in the last paragraph.
No, but so what I have heard is that it's not great, but the fact that it's kind of that it's been created and managed to attract the audience that it has, and it is largely an audience which is outside of, I suspect, the standard audience for this film. So it is interesting, and I'm going to go and see it on that basis. I'm not expecting it to be any masterpiece at all, but the fact is, it is a bit of DIY filmmaking that is perhaps indicative of the way things might proceed in the future.
Number 8 in the UK, number 5 in the States, Avatar, Fire and Ash. I think we probably dealt with that. Number 7, here is Marty Supreme.
Probably dealt with that as well.
Number 6 is Shelter.
Which I enjoyed. It's Jason. And as I said, apparently the lighthouse at the beginning, that's all a set. That is a built set.
Yes, it is.
Which is remarkable.
Number 5 in the UK, 3 in the States, Zootropolis 2.
This is now its 11th week of release, and it is in the UK top 5. And that is really doing well.
That's at number 5. Hamnet is at number 4.
Yeah, so because we're now in awards season, obviously that thing about somebody going to see Hamlet thinking that they were seeing Hamnut is not entirely surprising. I mean, it is particularly unfortunate that you have two films in cinemas with such similar titles. I was trying to think of another example in which you had two films in cinemas in which one letter separated the titles. I think Jessie Buckley is going to win Best Actress because her performance in it is astonishing. And I also think that, the sound and production design is terrific. I have reservations about the film itself.
The Housemaid is at number 3.
Again, seventh week in the top 10 and at number 3. And when I reviewed it, I said, it's ripe and camp, but kind of fun, but completely silly. 7 weeks in the top 10. And bear this in mind when we get to talking about Wuthering Heights.
Yes. Starring Amanda Seyfried, who's going to be on the show.
Is it Seyfried, not Seyfried?
No, it's Seyfried.
Is it? So I've been saying that wrong my whole life.
We all, in fact, in the interview, which I've done, I start off by apologizing to her for having got her name wrong all her life. But she's very clear. It's Amanda Seyfried. It just sounds wrong, but that's what she says. And then she says, my sister says it different.
Okay.
And I say, so how does your sister say it? Seyfried. But Amanda Seyfried.
Seyfried. Okay. Have you introduced her to Charlize Theron?
It just sounds like Right Said Fred, and so therefore it just sounds weird and wrong.
No, but listen, thank you. So did she correct you, or had you found out just before?
I looked up on Wikipedia and it said Seyfried. In fact, I heard a journalist on the radio say Seyfried, and I thought, well, that's wrong.
Wow.
And looked it up on Wikipedia and it said Seyfried. And then I watched a whole interview with her, and then right at the end, the interviewer says, how wrong do people get your name? And then she goes through all the list, and he says, so how do I say it? Seyfried. So it's very clear. That's what she says.
Okay, so it is right, Seyfried.
Correctly, yes. Very good. So anyway, Housemaid at number 3, 14 in America. Number 2 here is Stray Kids, The Dominate Experience.
Now, this wasn't shown to me. This is a K-pop concert film, Dominate, ATE, because Stray Kids have an 8 branding album, and so Dominate. It makes sense if you know the band. It is apparently more than a concert film. It takes you right into the world of Stray Kids because there's interviews.
Are they like the Stray Cats meets the New Kids?
Yeah, they are. They've got a double bass, and there's only 3 of them.
Okay, that's a number 2. Anyway, when you see any of these films, please let us know what you think. And number 1 here and number 1 over there is Send Help.
And I'm so glad about that. Sam Raimi's got a number 1 hit. Good for him.
Nick in Leeds, dear survivalist and naturist, what glorious, thought-provoking fun. Send Help works as cathartic wish fulfillment for every bullied or overlooked office worker, especially women trapped in those still thriving gecko-style patriarchal workplaces, and as a sharp meditation on 21st century misplaced priorities. McAdams is note perfect, finally taking centre stage as she transforms from meek, downtrodden plain Jane into a gleeful Amazonian blend of Bear Grylls and Annie Wilkes. The rat emasculation scene is a standout. Before seeing it, I heard Sam Raimi claim he'd restrained his more excessive instincts this time.
Yeah,
Happily, not a bit of it. The camera work and glorious set pieces, the plane crash, The boar fight and the spectacularly foul vomit sequences are as raimy as Drag Me to Hell and even at times Evil Dead. The shifting sympathies between McAdams' Linda Little and Dylan O'Brien's Nepo boss baby Bradley Preston are balanced on a conveniently found knife edge. It's such an effective two-hander the script could almost be staged. More than once, right up to the final shot, I wondered whose side I was meant to be on. Driving home, the fun, enigmatic ending kept unfolding in my mind. In a world that feels increasingly ruthlessly survival of the fittest, the film's message, no help is coming, so save yourself, is darkly, deliciously prescient. Because was this the message? Or was it, in fact, the opposite? Marvellous. Love the show, Steve, says Nick.
That's a very sharp email. That's very good. May I say one thing about that particular scene, the rat emasculation scene? It hadn't occurred to me until a few days afterwards, but that scene owes a huge debt to a film from 2005 called Hard Candy, which was directed by David Slade, who we interviewed when he did one of the Twilight movies. And it starred Elliot Page. And it is a really, really brilliant film. And when I was watching Send Help, I thought, what does that remind me of? And, oh, yes, there is a scene exactly like that in Hard Candy. And I bet you that Sam Raimi's seen Hard Candy.
Correspondents at KermodeandMayo.com. We're going to be back very shortly with Mark reviewing Whistle, Little Amelie and Wuthering Heights with our special guest, who is the director of said movie, Emerald Fennell. All right, it's guest time, and today we're going to be talking to Emerald Fennell, an Academy Award winner, of course, Best Original Screenplay for a Promising Young Woman. Saltburn was her second film, starring Barry Keoghan, and her brand new film is Wuthering Heights.
What should you do, Heathcliff? If you were rich?
Suppose I'd do what all rich men do. Live in a big house. And be cruel to my servants. Take a wife.
A wife? What wife?
Heathcliff, you're not enough. Not for her.
And that is a clip from Wuthering Heights. Emerald Fennell, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
How nice to see you again. How are you? Have you been looking forward to talking about this movie for like a few decades?
Yes, I have. I mean, it's just a joy to talk about something that you love so much.
So people will have read a few things about the movie, but I think we need to hear it from you. A book you read at 14, I believe. Do you remember the impact that it had on you? Do you remember actually where you were and what you were doing when you read it for the first time?
Absolutely, because it was on the curriculum. And I think before this book, everything I'd read, I loved reading, and everything I'd read had been, I'd sort of enjoyed it, but I'd never had the kind of feeling that this book gave me. And I think what it did was give me a physical reaction. It was really visceral. And I think for the first time ever, I kind of understood how important the connective part of making something is. And that somebody nearly 2 centuries ago can feel like they're sitting in a room with you, that you can understand, you can kind of profoundly like connect with someone out of time. And so I think it just blew me apart a little bit. And it's really interesting when I go to, when I speak to anyone from the Bronte Society, or I go to the Old Parsonage, or I speak to anyone who loves this story in this book, and Amelie, I think it's, for the people that love it, it's a very specific response and feeling that almost nothing else has.
Did you always know or hope that you were going to make this film?
I mean, I don't think at 14 I could ever have imagined that I'd be able to make things like this. I mean, in my wildest dreams, maybe. But certainly, after making Saltburn, the thing that I wanted to make most was something that would would have a physical and emotional reaction in people that would be a sort of communal experience. And I kept going back to that first thing that had done that for me, and that is Wuthering Heights.
So explain your casting when you finally get, when after the success that you've had and you know that this is going to be your next film, was the casting the first thing that you got sorted? Obviously the script has to be there as well, but Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi are so central to this story. Were they always your number one choices?
I mean, I think they'd be anyone's number one choices. They're so amazing. When I work, I kind of live in a dream world. So I visit imaginary spaces, usually 4 or 5 at a time. And one of them is, and has always been, really Wuthering Heights. And so it's more of a feeling. It's more of a kind of emotional landscape. And so once I started thinking about it seriously, I knew that I wanted to find people. I wanted it to be not just a tribute to the book, but a tribute to movies and a tribute to, the feeling that you get from a movie. And so I was looking at sort of Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara. I was looking at Burton Taylor. I was looking at those combustible, huge sort of, that huge charisma, that huge ability and beauty. And so it always felt to me like Wuthering Heights is it's both extremely real and extremely vivid and extremely rooted in reality. And it's also very surreal and strange. And so it needed to feel otherworldly. It needed to have people in it who I think have this sort of gargantuan, they're able to take up space in a way that, somebody like I couldn't hope to. They leave an imprint, they're indelible. And that's how I feel so much about Margot and Jacob in this movie.
So you'd worked with Margot before. She'd been a producer on 2 previous films. What did she say when you sent her the script? Or maybe it's been an ongoing conversation for a long time. I don't know.
No, I don't tell anyone what I'm working on until the script is finished. And then I just send them a script. And so when I sent it to Lucky Chap, to her and Josie, who I've worked with on all of my films, I think I was really lucky that she threw her hat in the ring, not only as a producer, but as an actor. Because I think after working together in such a different capacity for so long, we were both a bit shy. I would have been too shy, I think, to ask her because I wouldn't have wanted her to feel obliged, And so luckily she made the first move, and I was thrilled.
You've described Jacob as, I'm quoting here, a very surprising actor. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think he does, both him and Margot actually, and everyone in this movie. I'm interested in being provoked and surprised in my everyday life and when I'm watching movies. And so I think the thing that is about the people that I work with is what we do. The process is always, we do the boring stuff first. So we do the good acting first, in the same way as when we're building a set or we're looking at costumes. We look at all of the kind of straight-faced things first. And I always call it like the audition take. Let's do the audition take. Let's do the one that we know is going to work. Mm-hmm. And then let's do something different. Let's do something more interesting. Let's see what happens if you do it with a rigid smile the whole way. Let's see what happens if you never physically let go of each other. Let's see what happens if you don't have any power. Let's see what happens if you don't mean what you say. And a lot of actors, even extremely talented and experienced ones, will hold on to that first feeling they had and they won't want to let that go. And the thing is about everyone who I like to work with, and Jacob, having worked with him already, I knew that this would be the case. He wants to do something more interesting than the straightforward. And it's not that you often necessarily use those takes. A lot of the time it's just a sort of exercise and it's just but sometimes you need it, and you need somebody who's not embarrassed. They're not worried about failure. At every stage, I think you need to be brushing. You need to kind of feel the edge of a cliff with your toes.
And you mentioned the set, and you talked about the edge of the cliff. Explain what this film looks like, because the set design is extraordinary. Just give us a few lines on what you wanted this to look like.
I wanted it to look like an emotional landscape. I wanted it to be the kind of absolute physical embodiment of pathetic fallacy. So it's not just the weather that reflects the emotions, but it's every single thing, every bit of food, every texture of every curtain. And that's what working with Susie Davis and Jacqueline and Linus and all of the amazing people I work with is that there's an emotional reason for everything. And so it can be expressive.
Whose idea was the room based on the flesh of Kathy?
That was in the script, so I'm afraid to say that was mine.
Which is astonishing. Does it rain more in this? The film, rain in film I associate particularly with the piano.
Oh,
Welcome to New Zealand where it's raining, always. And I think your film tops it. I think there's so much rain in your film. Is it all the way through? I think it is pretty much.
I mean, it's raining a lot. It's raining a lot. I think also partly because I think I like to feel, and I think you can feel rain more than you can feel wind. So of course the moors are windy, but it's not the same stickiness. It doesn't do the same thing. I like people to be a little undone. As much as you want things to be kind of beautiful, there's something lovely about ruining something beautiful, whether it's kind of hair or costume. But also it only rains at Wuthering Heights until the end. It only rains at Wuthering Heights. And then we're in this kind of nebulous sort of always spring, summer at Thrushcross. It's almost like we go from one to the other, and we go from freezing cold to this sort of lovely, lovely, warm golden hour. And that's how one feels sometimes.
Obviously, Margot and Jacob are going to be taking most of the headlines, but I just wanted to mention Martin Clunes having such a great time.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's great. What a star that man is. Martin
is a star, and I have been obsessed with him my whole life. And look, what a deeply, deeply talented actor, and what an extraordinary man. And I think the thing is about this the character in the movie is a sort of combination of two characters in the book. And so what he needed to be, I sort of described him to Martin as a comedian without an audience. What happens to a comedian without an audience? What happens to, and up to a point, that's sort of what Kathy is too. She's a movie star without an audience. And so it's that person who has this lethal charisma. And if they don't get what they want, they are the most frightening person you've ever met in your life. And it needed somebody like Martin who has this innate warmth and this innate kind of charm that you would still love him in spite of how frightening and vile he is. I mean, I could literally talk about, I'm the number one fan in the Martin Clunes Club.
Yeah, he is fantastic. And I also just wanted to mention Owen Cooper, because we've discussed adolescence on this show, as indeed has every show. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen him in a movie before. Tell us about the chronology of adolescence, Wuthering Heights. At what stage did you get him? At what stage did you realize he was going to be such a great kid?
Well, adolescence hadn't come out. We didn't know anything about it, actually. I mean, it's all down to Carmel Cochran, the casting director, who's brilliant, and she suggested him, and he auditioned, and it was the most, well, as you can see in the film, it was just the most devastatingly brilliant audition. Him and Charlotte, actually, who plays young Kathy. And they read together, and it just was Heathcliff and Kathy. And then it was towards the end of filming, actually, when Adolescence came out and was this, explosion. But I mean, I'm not at all surprised, because he's unbelievably special. But everyone is, and I would say also Alison Oliver and Shazad Latif, they're playing characters that I think have been sort of in many ways, and Hong Chow, actually, they're playing characters.
She's great.
She's unbelievable. And these characters, it is an ensemble, this film. For all that it is the love story between Kathy and Heathcliff, that love story sucks everything into its orbit. It's a black hole, and it brings everyone down with it. And so you need to understand who Shazad is, and who Edgar is. And we looked a lot at the husband in Brief Encounter, and the fact that Brief Encounter is, to me, and has always been, a love story between a man and his wife, and what real love looks like, and real forgiveness and tenderness looks like. And it needed an actor with the charisma that Shazad has, and the kind of kindness and the tenderness, and you believe him, you love him. Same with Nellie, Hong makes an extremely difficult character so understandable. I always feel like I was always the Nellie reading the book, kind of looking in and thinking these people are deranged.
There will be a lot of headlines made by the outdoor pursuits, which I've followed throughout the film. Was there anything that you took out? Was there anything that you thought, no, that's too much?
Not really. I mean, look, the thing is for me is that this is like at the center of Wuthering Heights. It's about constraining nature, and so there's a reason for the dog collars and the bridles and the corsets. It of course there's something titillating about it, but the truth of it is that it's about what happens when you try and put something behind glass. When you talk about a lot of taxidermy hair work. It's dangerous. It's a really dangerous thing to do. And I'm really careful about how I show things like this. And I'm really careful about what gets put in. So usually it's way before script stage that I take out the more. It's only ever if it makes sense to me.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to say, I haven't read the book. And my wife was shocked when I told her last night that she loves the book as well. I have not read it. I had Far From the Madding Crowd. That was the book that I was studying. I feel as though I've missed out, though. Would it help if I read the book before coming to see your film?
I think it would help to read the book at any time in anyone's life. If you love reading and you love stories and you love feeling, then there's really nothing like it. And I think the thing is about it is it's deceptive because it's on the syllabus, because, often the cover feels, the writing is small, I always say. And as somebody who understands that feeling of groaning when you open up a book and the writing's too small and the footnotes are too long, it is a difficult book, but it is so transcendently good. It is as good. She is as good as Shakespeare. She is as good as Milton. She is out of her time. And so anyone should read this book. And if the least that happens with this film is it means a few more people read the book, then I'll be delighted with that outcome.
Emerald Fennell, thank you so much for your time. Nice to talk to you again.
So lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
Emerald Fennell, nice to have her on the programme again. And as ever, I'm aware of the things that we didn't talk about, but maybe we can go to some of those once you've actually talked about the film Wuthering Heights in inverted commas.
Yes, which I still don't fully understand. But so look, a lot to talk about in a great interview. Fennell said in that interview that she wanted this to be not just a tribute to the book, but to movies. Of course, Wuthering Heights has been filmed umpteen times. There's a version from 1920, an A.V. Bramble version, apparently largely filmed in Haworth, which is now believed lost. There is famously the Laurence Olivier Mel Oberon version, for which the tagline read, "I am torn with desire, tortured by hate." And then leaping forward, there was a Nigel Neal script for the BBC that was done in the 50s and 60s. There's a Timothy Dalton version from the 70s, which I haven't seen, but is apparently not bad. In the 90s, there's the Peter Kosminski version with Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche. I think that was the first time I actually saw Ralph Fiennes in anything. And of course, there is, early on, there's the dreamy encounter with Catherine's ghost scratching at the window. And a large part of the book takes place after Catherine's, I'm sorry with plot spoilers and all this, but after Catherine's...
I think we can cover
It's fine.
that.
Large part of the book takes place after Catherine's death, and it's, next generational, and there is Heathcliff consumed with rage and grief, and there's the whole thing about Cathy and blah, blah. Anyway, most of that... So in the book, they're really only together in death when they're buried side by side. In this version, the ghostly encounter that's recounted in Kate Bush's, let me in at the window thing, isn't here because this film concentrates on their life together. As I have to say, almost all film adaptations previously have done. So this is the story of their life together and their earthly and, as you pointed out, earthy relationship. Mm-hmm. There's also things in this. She actually names him Heathcliff and then says, therefore, that she owns him. So Emerald Fennell has said that her response to this is largely driven by the response of a 14-year-old girl encountering the book and feeling all these things. And it's the feeling and the tactility that she's trying to get to. So we see young Catherine and Heathcliff, Charlotte Millington and Owen Cooper, as you just pointed out, rolling and falling in green, to quote Kate Bush. They stay out in the rain too long. He takes a beating for her in order to, to save her because he's devoted to her. And then we go in on the newly beaten wounds, and then we come out when they're scars. Now they're grown up. Now they're Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, clearly destined to be together. But this, I know everyone knows this, he overhears her saying that she can't possibly marry him. So he goes off. She ends up marrying Edgar because they need money, because the family is sort of destitute, but she continues to pine for Heathcliff. Then Heathcliff comes back, now basically in charge of Wuthering Heights and exacting his revenge. And in the book, it is absolutely, driven by revenge, and then brutally wooing Isabella. And it is particularly sort of brutal in the film. So as far as the film's concerned, the first thing to say is the whole thing, it is preposterous. I mean, it is a preposterous adaptation, but I don't say that meaning, therefore it's bad. Emerald Fennell said in that interview, you like to have the feeling of your toes on the edge of the cliff. Was that the phrase she used? Which I thought was really lovely. You need to feel the edge of the cliff there. And you need to be not worried about being embarrassing or being ridiculous or being silly. And one could say that the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet, which struck such a sweet spot with that target audience, was also preposterous. It just happened to be something that was received very, very well. Emerald Fennell talks in that interview about, the physical, visceral reaction, and how what she wants to do is to create something that will create a physical, visceral reaction. She also wants to make it absolutely accessible to that, to the 14-year-old in her. So Anthony Willis scored Charlie XCX songs. The set and costume design, which you talked about in the interview, is a cross between Hammer Gothic, like blood reds, ominous dark blacks, lightning skies, landscapes drenched in, well, I suppose it's mist, but it kind of looks like it's come out of a mole fogger. There's also, weirdly enough, quite a lot of Derek Jarman sets for the devils in the set of Wuthering Heights. The tiles, the tiled arch is really, really Derek Jarman. She calls the whole thing an emotional landscape, the absolute physical embodiment of a pathetic fallacy. And it does have all of that about it. It all looks like a set, even the bits that aren't a set, because the whole thing is kind of like an imaginary emotional landscape, which is designed to within an inch of its life. The script has got that same kind of tongue-in-cheek sensibility that as certainly had in her previous films. I mean, the bawdiness of Saltburn, the sticky egg yolks dripping from sheets, the fleshy dough being exotically kneaded. You're pulling a face, Simon Mayo.
There's a dead fish. Can I stick my fingers into its mouth?
I wonder what that means. There's a lot of licking. There's a fair amount of drooling. There is an abundance of bodice ripping, rumpling and scrumpling, some of it involving mouthfuls of grass. And as she pointed out, there's a touch of horse's bit S&M. I was thinking at one point they should have called it 50 Shades of Green. But she says that at heart, the story is about constraining nature, hence the bridles, hence the corsets, hence the dog collars, which I'm thinking, yeah, but also, you conceded that, maybe that's a bit titillating. Maybe? Yeah. The main issue is the casting. Now, she talked in that interview about Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara, Burton and Taylor, and actually both of those are certainly evoked by the poster for Wuthering Heights, which looks like the poster for Gone with the Wind. And she talks about stars who have combustible, huge charisma. So it is certainly true that her stars have that. But it's also an indication that what she's doing is old-fashioned casting. And when I say old-fashioned casting, I mean the kind of casting that you could have got away with in the past, but is now somewhat frowned upon. So, if this was an old Hollywood version of it, then absolutely fine. Margot Robbie is a superstar. She's also playing a character who, in the novel, dies pretty much half her age, but that's fine because she's a superstar. As for Elordi, he's in his, late 20s or something, but he is nothing like Bronte's description of Heathcliff, who, of course, in the novel is described as being like dark-skinned gypsy in aspect and a little lascar, which is a sailor from India or Southeast Asia. And none of those descriptions fit Jacob Elordi. And so there's been the issue of whitewashing Heathcliff, although that is really nothing new, because you have to remember that Andrea Arnold's version of Wuthering Heights, which I think is 2010, was hailed at the time as being the first screen adaptation to cast a black actor as Heathcliff. And that's like nearly a century after the very first version. And so the idea that the whitewashing of Heathcliff is an issue, I mean, that has been all the way through the history of doing screen adaptations of Wuthering Heights. And Andrea Arnold was the person who then got flack for going the other way. The real surprise in the casting, as you said in the interview, is Martin Clunes. And I think he steals the show.
Yes, I agree.
Because he's playing a combination of two characters. You know, he is playing the father, and then he's playing the son. The brutality of him sort of drives so much of the plot, but he's playing it as one character who's been compressed. And actually, it's quite an interesting act of compression. But the thing that he gets right is, and I like Martin Clunes, but I never had on my scorecard that he was going to be this good in a dramatic role, because he's got the combination of buffoonery and threat. You know, the pathos and the rage. And I don't think I've ever been alarmed by him before on screen, because he's such a likable presence. You know, that's his wheelhouse. He's likable. I think he's really, really good. Plaudits too to Hong Chau's Nellie, who, you know, sort of effectively is the narrator of the story. So I think overall, it's ridiculous, although so have so many adaptations of it been. It's preposterous, and at times it sort of feels hollow because it's surfacey, and it's a lot of design, and it's a lot of upfront stuff, and everything's in your face. And of course, it's not the novel, but I mean, really, the Andrea Arnold is the one that gets closest to the novel, and that still actually does a huge amount of editing and changing and abandoning. And I kept asking myself all the way through it, if I was a 14-year-old girl, which, of course, as Sherry Lansing pointed out to me so spectacularly when I said I don't understand Titanic, and she said, that's because you're not a 14-year-old girl. I kept thinking, you know, what would you get from this? And I can imagine it being, a really fun cinema outing. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is ridiculous and it is silly. And there are bits of it that are like, oh, really? But I also don't get people getting off their bike and going, well, it's outrageous. That's not what the novel is. You go, yeah, no, it's not the novel. And maybe that's what the putting the Wuthering Heights title.
It absolutely is. That's why it's in inverted commas. It's her version of that.
Fine. Okay. Well, in that case, that makes, so as in inverted commas, Wuthering Heights, as recounted by a filmmaker remembering what they thought about when they were a 14-year-old girl, fine.
Yeah, I think that the first thing to say is it's a big hit. I think,
but you're predicting that it will be.
Yes, I think it will be, and I'm speaking as a 14-year-old girl now. I think I'll enjoy going to see it. So I do think Emerald Fennell knows that. I was clearly just listening back to the interview when we started talking about casting. I should have gone further on precisely the fact that, well, it's hard to say, isn't Margot Robbie too old and isn't Jacob Elordi too white? But I do think that, I know Emerald Fennell is amazing, but if you're a white director, you have to have a very, very good excuse to ignore the direction of a novel, which clearly says they're not white. So,
although it has to be said that for the best part of a century, filmmakers did ignore that. And as I said, that's why the Andrea Arnold version was considered to be so groundbreaking.
So, but it's 2026, and
I know.
I'm not sure you can do that anymore.
No, I do agree with that, and I do think the casting is a problem.
So I would just I agree with what you said. I think Hong Chau's Nellie is fantastic.
Yeah,
Alison Oliver as Isabella and Martin Clunes, I thought they were captivating, and I thought they were the heart of it, even though Jacob and Margot get to kind of thrash each other and snog and stuff.
Snog is a polite word.
Yes, that's true. But it's funny how it manages to be completely out there in terms of, here we go, eggs, fish, bread, all that again. And everyone keeps their clothes on for the whole film.
Yeah.
Because that's the way of things these days.
But do you agree with me that people getting off their bike about it and giving it 1 star are being silly?
Oh, well, one star is clearly ridiculous.
Yeah.
I understand why, because I did think at the end of the film, you think, okay, that was fun, and the Charlie XCX music works. Anyway, yes, it's fine. We've touched all the bases. I just think we go from Margot and Heathcliff and Jacob being like 10 years old to skipping a quarter of a century to when Margot is 35.
Although actually the characters are skipping 8 years.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like that.
But how, Merle Oberon was like, approaching 30 when she played. I mean, like, again, that's what I meant when I said it's very old-fashioned casting. It's the kind of casting that you would have got away with in Hollywood when no one cared how old you were, as long as you were famous.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think Emerald will have a big hit on our hands there, and it's the ads in a minute, Mark. But just before we get there, I know you've been looking forward to this because it's a particularly thrilling edition, even if it is free of crushed eggs, dead fish, and needy bread. It's the Laughter Lift. I'm suffering from insomnia at the moment, and I barely have the energy to read these jokes. But I will. Okay. I'm going to give it everything I've got, Mark.
Go ahead.
I'm going to put everything into this.
Okay.
Hey, Mark.
Hey,
I heard
Simon.
Nick Robinson on the Today programme, which I don't listen to, this morning say that eggs. We were talking about those eggs are going back up, which is going to surprise some chickens.
Hey, well done,
Mark. Did I ever tell you I used to court a communist girl from Tunisia?
Where is this going?
Who used to live in Morocco, had Kazakhstani parents, studied Chinese and supported Liverpool. Okay. I had to break up with her. There were far too many red flags.
Hey.
Did you hear about...
Are you editing on the hoof? Are you jumping over jokes? Okay.
Did you hear about Captain Nibbles, my 3-stone parrot?
No, didn't.
He sadly passed away last week. Always upsetting to lose a pet, but it was a huge weight off my shoulders.
Yeah. I did actually see that coming.
Yeah, but thank you for respectfully
not
holding
jumping
your tongue. In the next bit of the show, Mark is going to be talking about Whistle and Little Amelie. And we're going to be back after this. Here's an email from John Armstrong, MSc in Dementia Studies, ballroom dancing medals as well. Hi, I'm from Barcelona. I'm from Barcelona. Very confusing. My memory is not what it was, me neither. But I recall some time ago, Mark being surprised by Simon using the phrase, put a bat up your nightdress, and asking where that came from. Well, I know very well. Anyway, a phrase I remember him using fairly regularly on his breakfast show back in the day. I am sure he knows the source, but just in case he's having a senior moment, I'm not. I'm just back from the opening night of the Edinburgh leg of the Fawlty Towers play, and I heard the phrase then. It's from the episode Communication Problems, when Basil says to the deaf Mrs. Jenkins, who doesn't put a hearing aid on because it wears out the batteries, that if she doesn't stop bothering them, he's going to visit her in the small house and stick a bat up her nightdress. As I said, Simon probably remembers, but if not, us old guys need to help each other out. No, I do remember that. Our family had a vinyl copy of Fawlty Towers with the whole episode on one side and another. We had the Mrs. Richards episode on one side and the Hotel Inspectors on the other. And so putting a bat up your nightdress was a family thing.
Okay, right.
So that's where it came from. But John, thank you very much. And a very brief email. It takes longer to set up than it does to read it out.
Okay, go on.
But we were talking about Van Morrison recently, and you said...
I said there are two kinds of people in the world, people who like Van Morrison and people who've met Van Morrison.
Stuart Eckley emails, I've met Van Morrison. Right, Little Amelie is out. Take it away.
Little Amelie, festival favourite, French-Belgian animation, which is up for Best Animated Feature at the BAFTAs and Oscars, up against Zootropolis 2, Elio, and Oscars, K-pop Demon Hunters. It is adapted from Amelie Northam's The Character of Rain. I think it's actually called Little Amelie or The Character of Rain. Follows the childhood of Amelie, who is diagnosed at birth by a callous doctor as being a vegetable, although the voiceover tells us that actually she's God. She is supremely unbothered by everything with no need to respond to anything. Her parents are Belgian, living in Japan. They love her unconditionally. Then there is an earthquake, at which point she has a sort of 2-year-old awakening and suddenly starts reacting to everything, becomes a terrible 2, screaming, responsive only to the white Belgian chocolate brought to her by her grandmother. Her parents are distraught, but their landlady, Kashima-san, suggests Nishio-san as help, and she bonds with Amelie. Now, I saw this in a subtitled version, but I believe we have an English language clip from the trailer.
When you are 3, you see everything and understand nothing. Open up. I'm finally endowed with a gaze. And a body, too. What could I do now? My body was a prison. But then... a miracle transpired.
This is Nishio-san. She's gonna help us out around here.
You were the only one who could see the real me.
Yeah, terrible 3s in that case rather than terrible 2s. Anyway, so look, the film is basically a metaphysical journey from isolation to integration, from someone who sees themselves as the center of the world to someone who, during the course of the drama, learns to have an acceptance of being part of a wider world. I mean, that is really what the story's about. And it's a kind of perfect example of the way that animation can do that thing about talking to the child in all of us. And the way that animation now fulfills the role that folktales and fairy tales once did, which is to discuss really complicated ideas, really universal but complicated ideas, but doing them in a way that is completely accessible both to the very young but also to adults. Because as you know, if you've read your children fairy tales or you've sat with your children watching sort of classic animation, particularly, for example, the work of Studio Ghibli, you and your child can have a profound emotional response to the same material, because there is something about that kind of fantasia, that sort of fantasy, that works really well. The film is rated PG for mild threat and upsetting scenes, so it's not for the very youngest viewers. But like all the best Studio Ghibli works, and also, I mean, I was thinking about this in relation to The Red Turtle, which is, I absolutely love. It's got exactly the right amount of light and shade for a broad range of ages. The animation has got the kind of simplicity of the 2D anime, but it's created with a kind of contemporary magic that will dazzle open-minded audiences. It's got a great score by Mari Fukuhara, which really kind of gets that central fish out of water thing, because that's what it's about. It's about, a young girl growing up in Japan who then realizes that she's not Japanese, that her family is from Belgium. Also, that she thinks at the beginning that she is God, and then she comes to realize later on that she's part of a world. I mean, I found it very moving and engrossing and rather beautiful to watch. As I said, it's not for very young audiences, but if your children are up to speed with Ghibli, then they're in the right ballpark for this.
Excellent. So correspondence at kermodeandmayo.com, that's how you communicate with us. And that, if you have a voice note, is how you can send us some what's-ons. And we have a couple for you here. Here's the first.
Hello, Mark and Simon. It's Peter Blunden here, and I want to tell the listeners all about the Romford Horror Festival, which runs from the 19th to the 22nd of February at the Lumiere Cinema in Romford. We're going to have special guests, horror classics, indie shorts and features from around the world, and a very special preview of Cold Storage the day before its nationwide release. For passes and full information, go to romfordhorrorfestival.com. And
that's the 19th to the 22nd of February.
Very well done,
the Lumiere Cinema in Romford. Yeah, nicely recorded.
Nicely recorded.
A warm acoustic.
Yeah.
Sitting nice and close to the microphone. A lot of thought went into that. So clearly the Romford Horror Festival is going to be a big thing. Okay, here's our next one.
Hi Simon and Mark, this is Laura from Femme Films, a Guildford-based community cinema that screens exclusively female-written and directed films. We put on monthly screenings, with this month, our fourth ever screening, being 1999's camp queer cult classic But I'm a Cheerleader at St. Catherine's Village Hall. And next month is Agnes Varda's hugely influential French New Wave film Cleo from 5 to 7 at Newhouse Art Space as we celebrate International Women's Month.
Both of those are terrific movies.
And nicely recorded, Laura.
Yeah, very good.
Very much. St. Catherine's Hall, I think she said,
yes,
is where the first one is. All right. So if there is something in your life that is like that, cinema or cinema adjacent, then do let us know. Send us a voice note. correspondence at kermode.com. Have we got time for another film?
Yes, Whistle, which is Canadian-Irish co-production horror film written by Owen Edgerton, directed by Corin Hardy, who started out as a special effects monster maker. Used to make monsters in his bike shed, made Super 8 films with school friends, went on to make features like The Hallow and The Nun, which you remember I didn't. A listener wrote in and said, I can't believe you didn't call it The Nungery. Anyway, so Whistle is kind of like a, middle-of-the-road post-Talk to Me teen horror romp with Daphne Keane, Sophie Elise, Sky, a whole bunch of people, and Nick Frost. Now, the and Nick Frost, we always had this thing about ask for the and. It usually means that you're a small part in a movie that you're too big to be in. So, and Nick Frost is in this briefly at the beginning. So it starts with a scene in which there's a high school basketball player. He scores the winning, what do they score? Is it a net? What do you call it? The winning basket, I suppose. But he's then pursued into the showers by a ghostly apparition, which causes him to spontaneously combust. Oh. As someone later says, yeah, it never quite added up. He was in the shower, but he burned to death. And you go, yeah, right. Fast forward a few weeks. New girl Chris arrives at school amid stories of drug dependency and the terrible deaths of a member of her family for which she's responsible. She is assigned the locker of the spontaneous combustion in the shower basketball player, and she finds in it a jar which has got an Aztec death whistle, which of course you're very familiar with, which is promptly confiscated by and Nick Frost.
Wasn't that one of the bands you were with?
It was. I was in Aztec Death Whistle just before I was.
Yeah, because you were in so many bands. It does sound like one of yours.
Yeah, Roddy Frame played with us very briefly, but only briefly. Anyway, so and Nick Frost blows the whistle with terrible consequences. Next thing, the whistle is in the hands of a group of school friends at a pool party, all of whom hear its piercing sound and then find themselves haunted by the spectres of their own future deaths. Here's a clip from the trailer.
The day you are born, so is your death. If you hear the whistle scream, dying is not a choice.
Hello?
We were told the markings said, summon the dead.
The markings read, summon your death.
Our future death is hunting us.
We need to find a way to stop it.
Death is unstoppable.
To be honest, if you blow something called the Aztec death whistle, you deserve everything coming your way, really.
Yeah. And also, I love the thing about something never added up about the fact that he caught fire in a shower. Anyway, so look, it's a bit Final Destination. It's a bit post-Talk to Me. It's a little bit, I suppose, if we're going to go back into the history of all this, a bit Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You. And then it's got, all the tropes of every post-Scream high school Fright Fest, albeit with an added LGBTQ twist. Actually, I have to say something that is becoming increasingly prevalent in the horror genre is how much horror is now wearing on its sleeve. The fact that it's always been, kind of very open about that. Because, we had reviewed a documentary a few years ago about the fact that, I think the documentary it was called Queer for Fear. It was something like that. But because of the way in which horror works, its embrace of outsiders has always meant that it is a place that you can go if you don't feel that you fit with the mainstream. On the upside, there are some entertainingly splattery demises, although I still hold that CG splatter will never really replace the good scrunginess of physical, latex. Back in the day, back in the days of Evil Dead, this kind of thing would have been, it would have been on the Director of Public Prosecution's list, but obviously time has moved on, and now this is absolutely middle of the road. What certificate is it? I think it is 15 for strong horror, injury detail, language, violence, and drug misuse. So, very kind of middle of the road stuff. The thing
your
about
your idea of a
middle of the road, for middle of the road horror. The thing is, the central conceit of being prematurely confronted by how you would have died in the future had you not blown or heard blown the Aztec death whistle doesn't quite have the immediacy, doesn't quite have the kind of, oh yeah, I get that hook of, for example, Talk to Me, which you just hold the hand for a bit and you commune with the spirits. And it definitely doesn't have any of the subtextual stuff, which made a film like Talk to Me interesting, because that was really a film about addiction. This is all surface. It relies on some very basic jump scares. It's old school shocks with new tech, but it was fun while it lasted. And at 100 minutes, it didn't outstay its welcome. And we're at Valentine's Day, aren't we? Which is obviously why Wuthering Heights is out now. But anyone feeling a bit Halloween-y rather than a bit Valentine-y, it does exactly what it says on the tin. You won't remember it 10 minutes after you've left, but whilst you're watching it, it's fine.
That is the end of Take One. This has been a Sony Music Entertainment production. This week's team, Jen, Eric, Josh, Heather and Dom. The redactor was Paulie McPoolface. And if you're not following the pod already, please do so wherever you get your podcasts. Come and join us on Patreon, because it's where all the cool kids are. Mark, what is your film of the week?
Well, because, as Sherry Lansing pointed out, I am not a 14-year-old girl. My film of the week is Crime 101.
Back next week. Head to Patreon for all the good stuff. I think we should bestow a year's Ultra membership. Our correspondent of the week will be Richard in Sheffield, who is the guy who came up with the silent coding of trailers. Okay,
that's very good. Okay. Very good.
So he gets the Ultra membership. Thank you very much indeed for listening. There'll be another take with you exceedingly shortly. Well, in fact, one's already landed. So go join the fun.